What's up, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I know I'm in a different room now. I just started university, but that doesn't mean any of my content is going to change. I'm still here to talk to you guys about movies. Specifically, it's the end of September. Well, now it's the start of October. So like I do every month, I'm going to go through every single movie I watched last month. And last month I watched quite a lot of movies, so let's just jump straight into it. The first movie I watched last month was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It was a recommendation from a friend because I wanted to watch some kung fu movies before Shang-Chi, and it was an incredible movie. The action was, of course, perhaps the best action I've seen in any movie ever, and the story was so simplistic but wonderful, and the way they moved and all that stuff was just so beautiful, and the music was great, the writing was great. It was a really amazing movie. I gave it 5 stars. I then watched Cruella for the second time because I did see it in cinema back when it first came out, and I feel a bit controversial saying this, but I do really like it. I know it is very dumb, like Dalmatians and all that stuff. It is a very dumb movie, but it's got a lot of style and quite a bit of heart as well. I think Emma Stone's performance is absolutely incredible. I think that's the standout of the movie for me, and all the set design and costume design and all that stuff. And it creates some really wonderful moments too. I think it is a lot of fun, and I gave it 4 stars. I then watched Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I talked about this on this channel before. I've done a review for it, so you can go click up there, or is it there? I don't know. Go click in one of those corners to go watch that review if you haven't already. But short story, I love Shang-Chi. Top 5 MCU for me. It's easily got the best action of any MCU movies, and the characters are so great. Wenwu and Shang-Chi, specifically Tony Leung and Simu Liu, have absolutely fantastic performances, absolutely incredible, and just there was so much wonder to it. It was a great fantasy movie first and the superhero movie second. So it was funny, it looked great, the dialogue was incredible. I really appreciated how much of it was subtitled. The music was great. Of course, the action was the best part of it. It just worked so well. I gave Shang-Chi 4.5 stars, and then next movie is I went to watch Shang-Chi again. I also talked about it on my podcast, so go click whichever one of those it is to go check that out. I think it's that one. No, that one. So go check that out on my podcast. Talked about that at quite some length. What did I notice the second time? I think I noticed the second time the wonder of the amount of really good foreshadowing there is in this movie, and also how well the flashbacks just interwoven into the story, creating a kind of a very different superhero origin to what I think we've come to expect. Keeping on the MCU train, I then watched Iron Man 2, which isn't a good movie. I used to like this movie quite a bit, but on a rewatch more recently, it just didn't work at all for me. I think there was a lot to be desired left. I feel like there's just parts missing and bits smushed in that don't really work for me. I think Sam Rockwell's amazing, but he's always amazing. I think this movie has a really bad characterization of Tony Stark. I think this is the worst Tony Stark appearance in the MCU. It just doesn't really work. That element doesn't work for me, and I like parts of the introduction of War Machine, but I think overall it felt rushed and a bit out of place. And speaking of things that felt out of place, the moments that are supposed to be heartfelt with his dad also just didn't work for me because they kind of didn't fit into the overall flow of the narrative of the movie. The racetrack scene, though, one of the best action scenes in the MCU, absolutely incredible. And I don't like a lot of the setting up for Avengers that happened in this movie as well, apart from some good Black Widow stuff. I gave this movie 2.5 stars. I then watched He's All That, a movie I talked about on my podcast where every 3 weeks we talk about a bad movie, we talk about the good, we talk about the bad, and then we try to improve it. And He's All That, Addison Rae's movie, not good, obviously. It wasn't as absolutely terrible as everyone seems to think. There were some good elements to it, I just think it was a bit confused in its actual narrative and the way it told the story, and the dance number was terrible. There were some good performances, not Addison Rae, she was awful, and I think it just wasn't self-aware enough. A movie starring Addison Rae, and the message of the movie is you don't need to be famous on social media to be popular. I think that didn't work for obvious reasons. I gave it 1 star. I did watch a lot of MCU this month because I then watched Guardians of the Galaxy. This was on my birthday. Guardians of the Galaxy might be my favourite MCU movie. It probably is my favourite MCU movie. Just the way it builds this team and the way they come together is so excellently done. Every character is so perfectly defined, and they bounce off each other with such humour, such emotion. Just this entire movie is an absolute masterpiece. Of course, the soundtrack is great, the action is great, just the world building is absolutely phenomenal. This has to be my favourite MCU movie. The more I talk about it, the more I love it. Of course, I gave it 5 stars. A couple of days after that, I then watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, a movie which I was never a massive fan of, but on a rewatch, I kind of fell in love with it. I think I do really like it. I think it does a good job of furthering all these characters and giving characters who didn't have much of a chance to shine in the first one a chance to shine, because here we see a lot more of Gamora and Nebula. Their relationship is great, but the real standout has to be Rocket and Yondu. Their relationship is absolutely superb in this movie, and of course Yondu's death is so sad. It did make me cry on this rewatch, which I hadn't in the past. I would say go as far as saying the soundtrack's better. I really love Kurt Russell as the villain, and I love his relationship with Peter, and I love the big finale. Just so much of this movie works for me, and I gave it 4 stars. Okay, back to a podcast movie. I watched Spotlight. I talked about it with a guest new to Marvel, or Liz, and Spotlight isn't a movie I'd seen before, and I didn't even know what it was about, and I got some real tonal whiplash while watching it and discovering what it's about, because it's not about something nice. It's about molestation in the church and the journalists that uncovered this, and I thought that it was an absolutely incredible movie. It was really powerful and emotional, and there were so many great performances. Specifically, Mark Ruffalo was the best one for me. Just so much of this movie was so powerful, and you just sat there in awe watching it. I really did love this movie. 5 stars. Whoa, okay, quick intermission. This month I did a Muppet marathon, and we watched 3 Muppet movies, and now I'm going to talk about all those Muppet movies. So let's talk about the Muppet Palooza. Muppet time. I love the Muppets. The first Muppet movie we watched was The Great Muppet Caper. I'd never seen The Great Muppet Caper before, and it was pretty good. It was a pretty good parody of certain genres, and it was very funny. It had some great songs as well. Just I felt like too much of it felt like an experiment to me, of them going, oh, look at all the cool stuff we can do with the Muppets, just showing off what they can do with these puppets, instead of, focusing on the story and everything like that. The Muppet stunts were amazing, just I would have preferred more reliance on the plot or even the humour. But overall I did really like it. I gave it 3.5 stars. We then watched Muppets 2011, one of my favourite movies of all time. It is just absolutely endearing and sweet and incredibly self-aware and so intelligent, and every single song is amazing, and it's so heartfelt and emotional and optimistic. I just really love the Muppets 2011. Of course I gave it 5 stars. We then watched the sequel to Muppets 2011, The Muppets Most Wanted, which is a very funny movie. I would say it's maybe funnier than the first Muppets, maybe not, I'm not sure, but I would say it definitely has better music than the Muppets 2011. Just where it falls down for me, there's a lot less heart, there's a lot less emotion, and it's more pessimistic, where the Muppets is very optimistic for me. I still gave it 4 stars. And that was the end of the Muppet Palooza. Now onto a movie which is just as fun and as all the Muppet stuff, and that's Candyman, the new one. That's a joke. I wasn't a big fan of the new Candyman movie. I hadn't seen the first one, so that might have some part of it, but there was some good themes, and there was some really great cinematography and some great sequences, but that isn't enough to carry a movie for me. I think it left a lot to be desired in the horror department, and the characters weren't completely fleshed out. It was pretty good, just not great. I gave it 3 stars. I then watched Zombieland for the first time, and it was pretty good, just not my kind of comedy for a lot of it. I'm not a Jesse Eisenberg fan, and having him narrate an entire movie just didn't work for me. But there were some really funny moments. I really loved Bill Murray's involvement in the movie. Yeah, just a lot of it fell a little bit flat for me, but still had a fun time. I still thought it was a lot of good. I then watched Avengers Infinity War, probably my favourite Avengers movie of all time. I think this movie is really incredible with the way it combines all these stories and all these characters meet, and there's a dozen characters that have strong, powerful character moments, and they introduce this villain really well. Thanos is such a compelling villain in this movie, much better than he is in Endgame. It's funny and it's emotional, and they just deal with all these different characters so well, and the combination is so great. The real standouts for me have to be Thor, has to be Gamora, and I really love Star-Lord in this movie as well. I think they're top three perhaps. Of course, Vision, my favourite superhero ever, is great in this as well. I really love his death. It's my favourite death in the MCU. It is so well handled, it's so sad, and then it just happens all again, which just makes it so much worse. I think it's a really powerful scene, and of course the scene at the end when everyone's dusted, it is just as powerful and just as sad, and just excellently done with absolute silence. It is absolutely haunting. This movie has some incredible action as well. I think it gives a lot of characters a chance to shine, and it's just a wonder this movie is any good when there's 35 characters in it, all of whom one of them would be someone's favourite. Every single character in this movie is going to be someone's favourite character, and they all have decades of pre-existing stories, and they're all done excellently. I know some people were unhappy that certain characters like Captain America or Black Panther didn't have as much of a chance to shine, but what do you expect in a movie like this? I gave it 4.5 stars. Okay, this feels like an obligatory mention every month nowadays, because I watched Bo Burnham's Inside for the 5th time. I kind of put it on just so I could pack for uni while having it on in the background, something I've already seen, something I wouldn't pay too much attention to. But for the last 20 minutes I was just sitting there, just enraptured in it. I think every single time I watch this I forget how powerful and just how sad the ending of it is. Like, it really is like such a powerful 10, 15, 20 minutes at the end there, and I love all of it. Of course I still gave it 5 stars. I then watched The Matrix for the first time ever, and I thought it was really good. I think conceptually it is an incredible movie, but I don't know how well the execution is. I think because it would have been such a new concept at the time, there's too much exposition for me, and there's too much grandeur to it. I don't think they focused on like the characters' emotions enough, and I didn't think they got into much depth with a lot of the characters, but it looked great. Conceptually it was amazing. The action was great. I would have liked to see more paranoia as well, like there is in something like The Truman Show, which is a somewhat similar concept. But yeah, overall I did really like it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I then watched The Fast and the Furious, which is just a really fun and dumb movie, but I think it does take itself too seriously, and I think it does try too hard to be a bit sexy, which those elements I really didn't like. But there were some good races in there. Paul Walker's great. Vin Diesel actually does something which is some semblance of acting, which is something I haven't seen in over a decade. I can't stand Vin Diesel, but this movie's fun. I'm not a fan of the score. I think that's kind of trying to be too edgy as well, but it's got some good moments in there. 3 stars. I then watched Spider-Man 3, which, spoiler alert, I will be talking about on my podcast on Tuesday. That will come out, and this movie isn't great. I think in this movie there are 2 movies which are great movies. The 2 movies inside this movie are great and would be as good as Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. But then because of the studio, Sam Raimi was forced to mush these 2 movies together into one not great movie. And when I say there's 2 movies, I think there's one movie with Venom, and I think there's one movie with Sandman and Harry Osborn, and just smush them together doesn't work. Not a single villain out of these 3 have enough screen time, have enough development, are focused on enough, and that's the biggest problem with this movie for me, is that it just feels rushed and unevenly paced, and there's some weird stuff with MJ as always. MJ is always the worst part of this trilogy, and yeah, just let's talk about the villain individually, because I really like Sandman, but his I don't feel that sympathetic for him because his origin is so rushed, and so that didn't work as well for me. Harry Osborn, a lot of the parts work. The memory wipe, bad. Anyone gets amnesia in a movie, it is just bad. And Venom, it's not even Venom, it's just Venom has no personality, it's just Eddie Brock, and I feel like that's what the issue is here. If you gave Venom his own movie, you could have a story about Venom, and then alongside it you could have a story about Eddie Brock. The other issue is that Peter only wears the black suit for a tiny proportion of this movie, and that just didn't work for me at all either. Just the ending was rushed. There was some good stuff with Sandman, and of course J. Jonah Jameson was great. There was some solid action, but apart from that, just doesn't work. 2.5 stars. The good news is, though, we are ending on a high note, and that is with the farewell It's a movie about an Asian American woman finding out that her grandma's dying, but no one can tell the grandma. I would really recommend it. It's on Netflix in the UK because it's really sweet, and it sounds like the movie's going to be very sad, and an element of it is really sad, but it still manages to be so fun and hopeful and really funny at times as well. All the performances are absolutely incredible, especially Aquafina and, sorry, I don't know the name of whoever plays her grandmother, but those two really stand out to me. And it is a powerful movie. I won't spoil the ending, and it is quite sad to an extent, but not as sad as I think. It's not as sad as I thought going into it, but the cinematography was absolutely incredible in it. There were some amazing shots in this which I really loved, and just the ending was incredible. It was 4.5 stars. It was a lot of fun, which feels weird to say. Anyway, I would like to thank you all for watching. Please like, please comment, please subscribe. That stuff still feels weird to say, but thank you for sticking around this long. And I'm trying to post on YouTube more nowadays. Next week, I think I'll do a what if review because I have some thoughts on that show. And then we'll just see where we go from there. I'll see you next month when I do my October movie wrap up. Thank you and goodbye.